The dangling lights of Refinery Station 47, an abandoned orbital platform, barely clinging to life, throbbed overhead in fitful bursts. Beneath them lay the graveyard, a vast expanse of rusted hulls, twisted plating, and shattered cryogaskets that drifted in clotted piles around the station's skeletal framework. Every nook sprang echoes of forgotten battles and wasted dreams. Here, the ardent coalition's castaways toiled, scavengers, engineers, and misfits bound together by desperation. Captain Amara Vale stood on a catwalk high above the bay, her silhouette framed by a broken bulkhead where stars peeked through. Her boots crunched on metal grating as she surveyed the crew below. There were faces she knew by name: Drin Scarab Helvik, who could jury-rig in a time matter injector from a broken servomotor; Siora Keth, whose nimble fingers could splice any data bus; and Talo Paxes, the youngest of them all, eyes alight, with fevered brilliance, sketching blueprints in the grime. The official orders had arrived weeks ago. Central Command's message was clipped and brutal. Yard 47 crew reassigned. Salvage rights only. All new hardware allocated elsewhere. Report for decommissioning in 2 weeks. In plain terms, you're expendable. You're on your own. The Coalition's flagship battles raged in the outer systems, and supplies were funneled to them while Station 47 was of no further use. Its crew would soon vanish beneath the station's collapsing bureaucracy. Amara pressed her palm to the cool rail, tasting the tang of ancient steel. "They think this," she shouted down the throat of the station, her voice clear even as the clamor of plasma torches and hydraulic rams filled the hangar. "This heap of garbage is worthless." She paused, letting that sink in. "But every plate, every flux capacitor, every drum of coolant you can drag out of these hulked freighters, that's our lifeblood. It's our ticket to survival." A chorus of determined cheers rose from below. Scarab punched a welding torch into the air. "Let's give Central Command something to regret." Amara descended the stairs, moving among her people as they worked. She passed Garrick Juno, who was prying open the armory hatch of a derelict patrol skiff. Its weapons banks, though corroded, still held potential. "How long?" she asked. He glanced up, oil-smudged goggles resting on his forehead. "If the GRID holds another for cycles to clear this hull, then I'll skewer out the targeting arrays." He gave her a wry grin. Could have been worse, could have been a mining colony. She crouched beside Talo, who was crouched over a battered datapad, wires spliced into a section of hull plating. "You sure about this configuration?" she asked gently. Talo's eyes flicked up, bright with conviction. "If we angle the plating at 27 degrees, the dissipative vents will self-cool under sustained plasma fire. It's unorthodox, but we don't have standard heat sinks." Amara nodded. "Unorthodox is what they gave us." She stood. "Keep me posted." By the end of the first week, the graveyard had transformed. Where once lay a mountain of scrap, forged by drifting currents into a shapeless heap, there now rose the skeletal framework of something new. Long structural ribs curved upward, welded in sections by teams working around the clock. Struts and beams from half a dozen retired freighters formed the backbone. Hull segments, hatched from mismatched alloys, bore weld bead patterns like scars, each panel a testament to its former life. Engineers hustled through scaffolding, tracing hastily drawn lines where pipes and conduits would run. They scavenged power couplings from wrecked mining drones and rewired them into makeshift relays. Data nodes pilfered from ancient research probes were rewired into the ship's nascent neural network, ready to learn from every scrap of sensor. Data they could scavenge. Above them, the station's core thrummed with recycled power. Amara had brokered a clandestine deal with the grid technicians, months of overtime credits, and promises of profit sharing once the final vessel sold for scrap metal. If Command ever caught wind, in exchange, they tapped unused reactor loops to feed the burgeoning hull's construction. Night cycles on Refinery Station 47 were surreal. The orange glow of plasma cutters cut through drifting dust motes. Steam hissed as welders joined plates. The metallic scent clung to lungs. Meanwhile, far above, the infinite void of space spread indifferent and silent. One night, Amara found herself drawn back to the emerging bow of the warship in the making. She traced her gloved fingers along a freshly welded seam, the grain of composite alloy, the ridges of the bead. In that moment, She saw potential, a spearhead to pierce coalition complacency, a phoenix forged from the ashes of neglect. "Captain," Talo's voice startled her. He carried two cups of blackened coffee, thin, bitter, and barely warm. She accepted one, drawing in its acrid aroma. "You need sleep," she chided, though she knew he wouldn't heed it. "You're running on fumes." Talo set down the cups on a support beam, then took a sip himself. "There's something about this place. It's alive. Listen." He cupped his ear against the hull. For a breathless moment, there was only the hiss of ambient atmosphere and distant station hum. Then faint, pulsing, you could almost swear you heard it. A heartbeat. Amara closed her eyes. In the hot glow of the welding torches, with the slow crescendo of the station's generators thrumming beneath her, she allowed herself a moment of reckoning. "We're building more than a ship," she whispered. "We're building a symbol." Talo's grin was all the affirmation she needed. "They gave us scrap," he said softly. "We'll give 'em Prometheus." As dawn's pale light filtered through the station's fractured solar rays, Amara glanced up at the distant stars, resolute. Even if Central Command tried to sweep them aside, they would be ready. With every bolt they tightened, every circuit they restored, the humbled crew of Station 47 were laying the groundwork for defiance and for the fiercest warship the galaxy had ever known.
The skeletal hull of Project Prometheus loomed like an embryonic leviathan within Refinery Station 47's cavernous bay. Every girder, every hastily welded seam, spoke of ingenuity tempered by desperation. As the second week of construction gave way to the third, the crew settled into a relentless rhythm. Scavenge, assess, fit, test, and repeat. There was no off-duty, no respite, only the drive to forge their ragtag assemblage of cast-off technology into a single, harmonious warship. Phoenix Core, at the heart of it all, lay the Phoenix Core, a salvaged fusion reactor pried from the gutted hulk of the cruiser's sable wing. It sat at the center of the ship's spine, half buried in a lattice of support struts and power conduits. Its containment vessel, once a standard military grade, had been reinforced with 3D printed composite rings, layered over with repurposed nano-ceramic plating. Flames of cerulean plasma danced behind its viewports, illuminating the welders who fussed endlessly with stabilizer coils and coolant loops. Dreen Skarub Helvik oversaw the reactor's installation. He moved with the confidence of a surgeon, his welding torch held like a scalpel. When a stabilizer coil misaligned by a fraction of a millimeter, he paused the weld, recalibrated his magnetic clamp, and started again. "Precision or annihilation," he muttered, eyes fixed on his readings. Too loose, and the reactor might quiver itself apart. Too tight, and the stress fractures would spread like spiderwebs. Talopaxes approached, datapad in hand. "Core yields at 85% of spec, but regulator oscillations are spiking whenever we throttle above 50. He pointed at a graph of jittering waveforms. "If we don't damp that out, any evasive maneuver could push us past containment thresholds." Skarub tapped the datapad with a gloved finger. "I've beefed up the flux dampeners, but we're still running off mismatched capacitors from 3 different frigate classes. I'll need time to reconfigure the feedback loops." "Time's what they're trying to deny us," Talo replied, voice low. "Without full output, we're just another rust bucket." Amara Vale, watching from the catwalk, nodded once. "You'll get what you need. Prioritize containment over thrust. No warship survives a reactor breach." Cobbling the systems around the core, a swarm of engineers and tech rifters fought the battle of integration. The targeting computers came from a decommissioned destroyer. Its processor array had been fused to the wiring harness of an alien salvage drone. Siora Kef spent long hours hunched over a makeshift data bus junction, her fingers dancing across solder points as she coaxed signals into coherence. She muttered incantations in 3 languages as she worked: Standard, several outlawed dialects, and the guttural tongue of a downed Xanthian scout ship. Meanwhile, communications arrays drawn. From intercepted pirate freighters refused to align. One dish broadcast in a jagged, warbling frequency. Another relied on optical lasers too weak for long-range hails. A quarrel broke out in the Combs Bay when two factions insisted on different calibration schemes. Amara stepped in, her presence dissolving the tension. "We don't have time for turf wars," she said sharply. "You adjust the power amplifiers to compensate for dish inefficiencies. Talo, give them the specs." Within hours, the bay hummed with activity as engineers recalibrated gyro stabilizers and phased arrays. Static hissed in the test speakers, then resolved into the nervy pings of loopback diagnostics. When the first coherent data packet returned, the crew erupted in cheers that echoed through the steel corridors. Trials and tribulations night cycles brought new obstacles. The station's recycled power grid already straining under station-wide. Demand began to flicker. Power surges tripped circuits, plunging scaffolds into darkness mid-weld. Sparks danced across cables, igniting stray bundles of insulation. Amara instituted rolling blackouts, dividing the bays into hot and cold sectors, each with its own auxiliary generator. Garrick Juno oversaw the installation of jump-start capacitors, forging a buffer against sudden outages. In the alcove. Cold sectors. Welders worked by the dim glow of emergency lamps, their tethers twisted like vines around structural beams. The risk of faulty welds increased tenfold, but the crew adapted, marking each joint for later inspection under full illumination. Throughout it all, Central Command's patrols chipped away at the station's patience. Unmarked vessels droned past the docking bays, scanning for illicit activity. Infrared drones patrolled the graveyard, their searchlights probing for unauthorized power draws. Rumors circulated that the command intended to seize the hull frames and melt them down. Amara refused to be cowed. She organized decoy operations, salvage crews rooted to dummy wrecks, feigning interest in scrap that would trigger harmless alarms. Cutter boats at dismantled drones loitered at the station's rim, ready to jam scans with improvised ECM bursts. Every deception bought precious minutes for the true work within. Milestone. The first. Spin up after 4 weeks of relentless toil. The day arrived for the Phoenix Corps' first integrated spin-up. The crew gathered in the control ring, a circle of consoles carved into the superstructure like the spokes of a wheel. Amara stood at the lead console, Talo beside her, flanked by Scarab, Ciora, and Garrick. Initiate coolant flow. Amara ordered. Coolant lines hissed to life, pumping a silvery fluid through the core's conduits. Monitors flickered, displaying pressure, temperature, and magnetic containment metrics. Slowly, power output climbed. 20%, 30, 40. The crew held its breath as oscillations rippled across the feedback graph. Flux stabilizers at maximum, Scarab reported, voice steady, oscillations damping. Amara keyed the throttle override. Bring her to 60. At 60%, the warning lights glowed amber. The hull resonated faintly underfoot. Steam vents hissed, fighting to shed excess heat. Then a smooth plateau. Readings stabilized. Talo exhaled, relief softening his features. Containment holding, shield systems nominal. We did it. A roar of applause washed over the control ring. In that moment, Prometheus's heart beat true. A shadow falls, the triumph was short-lived. Moments after the reading steadied, alarms sounded throughout the station. The overhead speakers crackled with a terse broadcast. Attention Refinery Station 47. This is Central Command Patrol Vessel Triton. You are ordered to cease all unauthorized modifications to station assets. Power readings indicate significant unlicensed energy draw. You have 5 minutes to comply. Failure will result in interdiction and asset seizure. Murmurs and shouts cascaded through the bay. Engineers abandoned their workstations, rushing for emergency power cutoffs. Talos hand hovered over the comms transmitter, finger trembling. Amara's gaze was ice. "Hold positions," she said. Then, into the intercom. "Triton, this is Captain Amara Vale of Station 47. We are performing routine maintenance for sanctioned salvage. Nothing unauthorized is occurring. You may depart immediately." Static buzzed in her ear. Then, a cold voice. "You have override codes 443 and 119? Negative. Prepare to be boarded." Her crew exchanged grim looks. The ragged warship they were forging still raw, incomplete, vulnerable, stood poised at the brink of its greatest trial. As the station's bulkheads shuddered with the approach of boarding craft, Amara tightened her grip on the console rail. "We finish this," she told them, voice low but unwavering. "No matter what they do." And with that resolve, the crucible. A fire pressed down upon Prometheus not to break her, but to temper her into a blade unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. A roar of blaster fire ripped through Refinery Station 47's main bay as Central Command boarding craft slammed into the outer bulkheads. Alarm klaxons blared, drowning out the hiss of steam vents and the crackle of welding torches. Above, the chaos, Project Prometheus hung half-built, its skeletal hull a promise of power yet to be realized. Now, that promise would be tested in the crucible of battle. Preparations under siege. Amara Vale leapt onto the gangway leading to Prometheus's bridge control module. A repurposed landing shuttle fused to the starboard flank. Sparks rained. Down as Scarab's makeshift plasma turrets engaged incoming drones. Metal groaned under the weight of panic and pressure. Engineers abandoned their stations, clutching toolkits like lifelines, while welders scrambled to brace struts against hull breaches. Status. Amara barked into the comms as she reached her command post. A mass of monitors flickered with data: power draw, hull integrity, atmosphere levels. Talopaxis, pale but unbowed, keyed lines of code into the main console. Reactor outputs steady at 70%, he reported. Shield emitters charging at 30%. He glanced down at a jagged graph. "We're not fully armed, Captain. Only one of the quad-array turrets is online, and the missile lockers are still offline." Amara's jaw clenched. "Then we make do. Divert every jot of power to that one turret. Scarab, give me maximum plasma spread on port side. Garrick, man the comms. Jam incoming boarding charges." Garrick Juno, drenched in sweat, slammed a hardened relay onto the docking channel. "Jamming now. They're trying to lock mag grapples on the cargo bays. If they breach, they'll flood the hangar with vacuum charges." "Not on my watch," Amara growled. She slammed her fist into the console. "Everyone fight for every bolt and beam. We launch or we die here." Ignition and launch. With a shuddering lurch, the skeletal hull of Prometheus detached from the station's main clamps. Magnetic rails screeched as the ship slid free, smoke trailing from weld seams too fresh to cool. The boarding craft exploded against the station's bulkhead, sending debris scattering into the void. Amara slammed a switch labeled main thrusters and felt the vessel shudder beneath her feet as the Phoenix core funneled raw fusion energy into the improvised drive coils. "Engines at 30%, Hollow announced. "No major fluctuations." "Bring her to 60, Amara ordered, voice steady. The bay lights flickered, then stabilized as auxiliary relays kicked in. With a groan of protest, Prometheus pivoted toward the station's open exhaust port. Its escape corridor into open space. Port-side plasma turrets flared, sending searing arcs that shredded incoming drone wings. Sparks danced across fractured girders as stray rounds hit pressure conduits. Outside, the fractured solar arrays and drifting wreckage blurred past. The vast graveyard receded as Prometheus accelerated into the void, raw power pulsating through its mismatched hull. Static crackled in the comms as Central Command's frigates scrambled to intercept. Into the fray moments later, sleek patrol frigates loomed on the viewscreen, their ion cannons glowing cold blue. Dozens of fighters swarmed behind them, their heat trails painting fiery arcs against the star field. Amara took a steadying breath and keyed the tactical display. "They're trying to box us in," she said. "If they corral our aft, we're dead in space." She tapped coordinates into the helm. Talo engaged the emergency thrusters. Scarab focus fire on that lead frigate's port engine. We disable one. We get a gap. Plasma bolts lanced out, flickering like blue stars. The lead frigate's engine bank erupted in a cascade of sparks and flame. Alarm sirens screamed on the enemy's com frequency as the ship spun out of formation. Prometheus veered sharply, using its impromptu thrusters salvaged from 3 different interceptor classes to weave through the fighter screen. Missile tubes ready, Scarab reported, eyes gleaming, locking on multiple targets. Amara keyed in a firing sequence. A volley of scavenged missiles each one, Frankenstein's assembly of guidance fins and warheads sped toward the densest cluster of enemy fighters. Explosions bloomed like fiery pollen, carving lethal swaths through the swarm. One fighter managed to ram the hull, gouging a deep gouge, but vacuum seals held, turning the tide as Prometheus embraced the chaos. The vessel's improvisational nature became its greatest asset. The mismatched thrusters responded in unpredictable sequences, breaking the frigate's targeting solutions. On board, every panel and pipe strained under the sudden stress, but held an emblem of the crew's resourcefulness. Shields at 50%, Talo warned, dropping fast. Divert power, Amara snapped. All to front shields. We push through their center. The Phoenix Core's hum deepened as auxiliary circuits rerouted. Shields flared to full strength, bathing the bow in a ghostly blue glow. With a sudden jolt, Prometheus surged forward, ramming the incapacitated frigate. Armor plating groaned and buckled under the impact, sparks streaking across the hull. "Prepare boarding countermeasures," Amara ordered. "I want every choke point sealed." Garrick answered with efficient calm. Automated bulkheads slid into place, sealing corridors. Gas vents primed for depressurization. Holographic decoys flickered into existence, tricking incoming drones into phantom corridors. The last stand too. Enemy frigates reformed around the crippled ship and opened fire. Ion beams lanced at the shields, fracturing their integrity. Prometheus shook violently as the hull absorbs the onslaught. "Main turret overheated," Scarab shouted. "We've got one shot before it melts down." "Make it count," Amara said. She watched the targeting reticle pulse across the nearest frigate's engine cluster. Fire! The plasma cannon discharged in a blinding geyser of light. The frigate's engines detonated from within, ripping its hull apart. A second. Frigate veered away in panic, its remaining fighters scattering. Pursuit fighters are breaking off, Talo reported, voice tight. They're regrouping around that battleship-class vessel. Amara tightened her grip on the console. They want a decisive kill. We'll give them one on our terms. A narrow corridor Prometheus slipped into a narrow canyon of wreckage crashed. Transports and dismembered hull sections, creating a gauntlet of metal towers. The frigates hesitated, unwilling to chase into the debris field. Amara engaged the ship's last reserves of speed, weaving the vessel through the labyrinth with instinctive precision. Sweat beaded on her brow as the bow scraped past twisted ribs of an old cruiser. Warning klaxons screamed, but she maintained the course. At the canyon's end lay open space and freedom. "Exit clear," Talo said, relief edging his tone. Amara exhaled. "Full burn to maximum." Let's put as much distance as we can between us and Central Command. The engines flared, illuminating the hull's uneven plating. Prometheus leapt into the black, leaving behind the bloody glow of battle. Aftermath in. The silent calm that followed, the crew gathered on the bridge. Each face was streaked with grime and relief eyes, wide with the knowledge that they had survived. Scarab rested his toolkit against the bulkhead, breathing heavily. Siora rubbed a burnt hand, smiling wryly. Garrick leaned on the console, wiping sweat from his brow. Amara stood at the viewport, staring out at the star-flecked void. She felt the ship's heartbeat beneath her, the Phoenix core's steady thrum echoing her own racing pulse. "We did it," she said softly. "They tried to crush us with numbers and firepower, but they gave us scrap, and we built a warship that broke their lines." Talo joined her by the viewport, his silence a testament to awe. "They won't forget this," he murmured. Amara's gaze hardened with resolve. "No, and neither will the galaxy. Let them send more ships. We'll be ready." As Prometheus vanished into the dark, the distant flare of patrol lights shrinking behind them, the skeletal dream of scraps and sparks had been forged into living steel and baptized in fire. The greatest warship the galaxy had ever seen had awakened. The desert sun hung low over Cassara Prime's crimson sands as the final transports descended into the hastily constructed hangar complex. Beneath the arched roofs of corrugated metal and reinforced composite, rows of ships, each a patchwork of salvaged components, rested like great mechanical beasts awaiting their riders. At the center stood Project Prometheus, gleaming in the warm twilight, its hull plates polished to a dull mirror by crews working round the clock. Arrival. On Cassara Prime, Captain Amara Vale strode down the ramp of the lead transport, cloak dusted with ochre grit. Around her, refugees and engineers buzzed with excitement. Cassara Prime had become the hidden cradle of their rebellion, a world outwardly barren and inhospitable, but rich in abandoned factories, scrap salvagers, and sympathetic contacts who saw in Project Prometheus the spark of hope the coalition had long stamped out. Talopaxes stood waiting, datapad in hand, flanked by Sioraketh and Dreen, Scarab, Helvig. They exchanged weary grins as Amara approached. "You look like hell," Talo greeted her, voice warm. "But Prometheus looks spectacular." She nodded toward the bow curved in sleek defiance. "We're running out of time. Central Command won't stay deaf forever." Ahead, Garrett Juno barked orders to a squad of mechanics fitting new adaptive thrusters to a cutter corvette. Smoke and sparks drifted overhead, the clang of tools punctuating the humid air. Everywhere, reclamation teams trod the line between artistry and desperation, hand-hammering panels into place, rewiring power cores, and reinforcing bulkheads with carbon nanotube weave, forging the flotilla in the vast operations tent at the heart of the complex. A massive hollow projection floated above a circular table. It showed a crescent of newly completed vessels, corvettes, frigates, and improvisational gunships, each hull bearing the mark of its builder. Under the projection's glow, Amara reviewed the roster. 10 corvettes ready, Garrick reported, tapping the table. 5 frigates, 3 gunships, and 2 heavy missile platforms. Siora pointed at a rust-streaked cutter. "The Dune Raptor has a new ECM Sweet Half Pirate grade scavenged from Sector 9, half jury rigged by Chandra's crew." Amara studied the image. She danced circles around enemy sensors. "Good? Scarab?" He tapped another console, swapping in blueprints. Iron Shade's triple-barrel plasma array is calibrated. Should mow down light armor in a single burst. Amara let that sink in. A 200-strong squadron of this ragtag armada could challenge a full detachment. She leaned forward, voice quiet but fierce. "We attack departure convoys, supply shuttles, anything that feeds Central Command's war machine. We starved them of fuel, munitions, and morale. Talos' fingers flew across the data grid, and we broadcast every victory the Hulker moons, the Vorine trade lanes. Let word spread that the scrap armada is more than myth. A murmur of vow. Agreement rippled through the tent. In that moment, the disparate crews, once strangers united only by exile, felt the first stirrings of a true navy. The first strike, 3 days later, under cover of Cassara Prime's electrical storms, the flotilla slipped from orbit. Prometheus led the line, blazing a trail of ion-charged exhaust through the black. Among the escort, the Doom Raptor arced in silent ECM cloak, while the Iron Shade gleamed with simmering plasma in its weapon ports. Amara stood on Prometheus's bridge, hands clasped behind her back. Beyond the viewport, distant trading lanes shimmered like silver threads. She tapped the holotable. Intel says Convoy Pi 9 will depart Noel Station in 4 standard hours, loaded with cryogenic fuel and munitions. Scouting drones confirm. 2 escort shuttles, no heavy frigates. She met her officer's eyes. We'll hit them here. She tapped a point midway along the trade route and vanished before command can respond. Ciara's fingers danced as she activated the "Come, all units, this is Vale. Time to show the galaxy what scrap can do. Execute Plan Phoenix." A chorus of affirmative replies crackled back, then a single determined voice. For the Coalition. Ambush in the void. As the convoy lumbered through the void, the flotilla held position along the leading edge of an asteroid belt, its jagged rocks providing cover. Prometheus powered down its emissions, becoming invisible in the darkness. Escort shuttles flanked the fuel tankers. Complacent after years of safe passage. At Talos' signal, the Doom Raptor breached cloak, its ECM pulse scrambling convoy sensors. Panic rippled across the perimeter when the first tanker's engines winked out. In the confusion, 3 corvettes dropped from the belt, their magnetic grapples tearing at hulls and breaching cargo holds. Missiles streaked from hidden bays, detonating in controlled blasts that left the metal drums intact, but venting fuel into open space unusable to the enemy. The escorts scrambled, but the Iron Shade's plasma arrays roared to life, carving arcs of blue-white energy that shredded pursuit wings. Prometheus at point unleashed a salvo of adaptive missiles that deftly tracked and disabled the shuttle's aft thrusters. Within minutes, the convoy was crippled, supplies adrift and escorts dead in space. Amara watched the holographic display. As the enemy sent a distress beacon, all units disengage. Retract to secondary vector Gamma 4. Engines flared. The flotilla dissolved into the asteroid field, leaving behind nothing but the drifting wreckage of a once proud supply. Lying in the aftermath, Talo intercepted the enemy comms. Frantic, fearful pleas for reinforcements, and rumors that an entire wing had fallen to a fleet of scrap-built demons. Rallying the resistance news of the ambush detonated across Coalition territories. Hollow transmissions aboard civilian freighters and smugglers' dens relayed the tale with breathless excitement. "The scrap fleet strikes again," shouted one bulletin, a ragtag band tearing through patrols with impunity. Resistance. Movements once fragmented and fearful seized the opportunity. On dozens of worlds, clandestine operatives reached out to Amara's network, offering docking bays, fresh scrap heaps, and willing pilots. Every message carried the same plea: "We can fight. We need only your flag." Within a fortnight, Cassara. Prime's hangars swelled with new hulls. Ancient patrol skiffs resurrected with modern drives. Civilian transports converted into troop carriers. And even a captured enemy frigate, its livery burned away and rechristened the Ember's Wrath. Each was a testament to the principle that rejection and ruin could be refashioned into instruments of liberation. The price of victory, but victory, came at a cost. The psychological toll weighed on the crews. Nights haunted by the hollow-eye sockets of derelict ships, loss of comrades in firefights, and the constant threat of betrayal from within. Ciora lost her younger brother in a skirmish. Over the Orion run, Scarab's hands bore new scars from reactor remediations that exploded in his face. Garrick wrestled with nightmares of vacuum breaches that claimed entire squads. Amara held a private council in the flagship's wardroom, its walls lined with schematics of new ship designs. The mood was sober. "We can't keep pushing like this without rest," she said quietly. "We need time to refit, train new crews, and repair our losses." Talo tapped the map of Coalition space on his datapad. "Agreed, but Central Command's hunt has intensified. They've dispatched 2 destroyer squadrons to clear our supply lines." She closed her eyes, mind racing. Every recycled hull represented lifeblood, fuel, metal, hope. If the next resupply failed, Prometheus would be alone against an armada. "We'll draw them away," Amara decided. A feint. "I'll lead a small task force through the Tyrian Gate, hit some minor depots. They'll pursue us, and that gives the rest time to regroup." Nod circled the table. It was a gamble, but one they had to take. The decisive Gambit 6. Fighters and 2 corvettes formed the strike team. Prometheus, stripped of its missile pods to lighten mass, led them through the gambling streams of the Tyrian Gate, a chaotic warp conduit that few dared traverse. The destroyers, sleek and overconfident, followed at full chase speed, their sensors fooled by the warp distortions. Emerging near the deserted moon station of Epsilon V, Amara ordered the drop. As the destroyers closed in, the flankers released. Dozens of micro-drones reprogrammed salvage bots that swung to jam sensors and feed false targets. The destroyers, locked onto phantom blips, unleashed volleys of ion fire into empty space dotted her command. Prometheus reactivated its main sensors. In the confusion, it closed fast on the lead destroyer. With a roar that shook its mismatched hull plates, the ship fired a single full-power plasma beam harvested from the Phoenix core, focused through a hastily aligned dish lens. The beam punched a glowing hole through the destroyer's bow, severing its bridge and spinning it into self-destruct. The remaining destroyer halted, its captain calling for surrender. Amara extended an electronic parley. "Cease pursuit. Withdraw your fleet and leave Kessara Prime's orbit, or face the same fate." Minutes later, the comms channel went silent. When the first chasing frigates limped into sensor range, they found only the ghost of Prometheus, its signal jammed. Its shape dissolved back into the folds of warped space. Epilogue. A new dawn. 3 cycles later, beneath Kessara Prime's twin suns, Amara stood atop a refurbished railcar, overlooking it on a assembly yard 1,000 times larger than the first hangar. Fresh beams of alloy stretched skyward, prepped for the next wave of builds. Engineers drilled, welders sang their sparks, and convoys arrived with raw scrap from sympathetic worlds.